I'm Megan Williams with ABC, and thankfully I've brought in people much smarter than me to talk about today's safety advisory discussion topics. So our safety committee meets every month, and we talk about an endless list of things in the safety and wellness world. And we decided that these three topics today that we're covering are of utmost importance at all times, but we've got some great guys here to discuss these. So today we'll be going over crisis management, we'll be going over active aggressor, and then how to deal with a fatality. So there are some themes woven throughout these topics, but they're also all standalone. So our first speaker is Alan Rogers with Cadence Insurance. And then after that, we're going to have Russell Bailey with the Rose Law Firm. And then taking the finale here is Mr. Mike Reel with Forsgren, and he gets bonus points because he came all the way down from Fort Smith this morning. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up Alan here, and
Okay. Thank you, Megan. I appreciate the opportunity and I appreciate the introduction. Again, my name is Alan Rogers. I'm with Cadence Insurance. We're a company owned by Gallagher Insurance Group. I am a producer. I write insurance for contractors and do surety bonds for contractors, and we come across all kinds of crisis managements. We have teams in place to help with these, and when somebody asks for these type of presentations, we have a group in our committee who's willing to jump on it and come up with alternative methods to fight it or to handle it, whichever way you want. But I've worked with ABC doing some presentations on active shooter before. I had a part one where it talked about the active shooter. Then we had a part two about an aftermath of what happens after the incident. Today, I'm just going to go over some brief stuff. We have 15 minutes each. We could talk half a day on active aggressor, what to do, what not to do, all kinds of, unfortunately, there are a lot of case studies. The FBI is real good about being able to provide those case studies if you look for any and want to look at how they were responded to. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over some highlights. I have some handouts back here in the back, or if anybody needs one emailed to them or sent to them, Megan will see that they get them. But I've got these in highlights up here. I'm going to kind of go over them. And they're just basic points about active aggressor, active shooter in this instance right here. But what an active shooter is, it's considered, an active shooter is considered someone who goes into a place of business or a place of with several people, multiple people there, with the intent of doing as much harm as possible. That's what they define as far up here as project. They use firearms. A lot of them are used with firearms, but you may hear somebody using a knife, or you may have actually heard somebody using their vehicle. Motor vehicle, if they kill more than 4 and the standing, is considered an active aggressor and can be considered a fatalities. If there's more than 4, if there's at least 4 fatalities, they call it an active aggressor. Some of the things that occur, you have all kinds of fatalities. That's the point of it. The fatalities are what they go after. They may have one person in mind or several people in mind, but they usually get anyone who's in the way. They also have lots of injuries. Again, the idea is to provide as much chaos as possible. And any of those who have been in the military they're pretty much aware that usually when they're just injured, it's more of a problem than when they have been fatally taken care of. So the seriousness comes when there's a lot more injuries than there is with fatal fatalities. They're usually actual in workplaces. They look for what's called, they call them STCPs, soft targets and crowded places. They look for those because they can get in them easily, and they can usually get out easily if that's the intent to get out. A lot of active aggressors do and are aware and are prepared to take their own lives. So when they go in, they look for places that they'll give them easy targets, multiple targets, and with the least resistance. So what we prepare for is we make sure that there's enough security around, prepare for that in the event that it happens, or actually to try to stop it, make it not an easy target. But it's also accessible to the public. Anybody can walk in. They can go into limited security, like shopping malls, amphitheaters, fairs. They can go to all kinds of things, restaurants, entertainment venues, even sporting events, music festivals. all those have been hit. All those have had some active aggressors at some point. They occur at a workplace, usually when there's a disgruntled employee, or it's a disgruntled spouse, or some sort of domestic dispute. Those happen quite often, and they can cause active aggressors. For instance, I've had several times when we've had extra security measures because someone in the workplace was going through some kind of domestic squabbles, some kind of domestic problems, and had to have extra security at the office in case something like that happened. What we look for in those instances is kind of like in commercial and retail. They've broken down here, commercial and retail. That's your workplace. 54%, 52%, 5% is government offices. Education is 3.3%, although you hear a lot more about schools. Religious organizations such as churches, that's 2.6%, and hospitals, healthcare facilities, look like they're at about 2.6. But the FBI said 33%, which is a third, which I wouldn't have thought this, were in open spaces. If you remember the MGM, the guy was in the hotel, but it was an open space out there that they fired upon. And I'll bring that back up here in a minute. But these incidents have all kinds of impacts, and it's not just from fatalities, it's what happens after that as well. They got special effects. I mean, it's amazing how somebody, if they've been in the military and they know someone who has PTSD, that is actually caused from some of these events. People are not trained to handle that, and it happens in front of them. They have a fatality that's close to them, or they have somebody that's injured, or they themselves are injured. It can have long-lasting effects. Megan, can you scroll up to the next part? Oh, I'd have gone over and done that. I didn't think the same one. There you go. Well, to go over next, kind of the aftermath. When that happens, there's a lot of things that go through people's mind. The incident occurs, and FBI come up with the most active shooter or most active aggressive incidents occur within 5 minutes. 5 minutes of that causes years of aftermath. And it can be very costly to a company to put up with these aftermaths. Like we have recovery expenses. What are recovery expenses? Well, he has a few listed here. It costs, medical bills, funeral expenses, psychological assistance, employees, workers' comp, employees, OSHA fines. Those can be that's a big expense. Some lawsuits. How many are going to hold lawsuits? How about education? Or to come up to education. How about replacing employees that will no longer come back or actually were some of the fatalities where your employees, they have to be replaced. How about fixing up the workplace? Somebody comes in and they start shooting, what happens to the property around it? It gets destroyed. You can destroy major pieces of equipment. You can destroy windows. You can destroy office furniture. You destroy everything. Those are additional costs that come up with it. The lawsuits. Well, the lawsuits are going to start filing. They're going to have lawsuits. So you have to have a way to protect yourself from lawsuits. They've got, for instance, the MGM, I mentioned that earlier. When the gentleman was shooting out the door, there were $800 million cost MGM to settle that. $800 million they had to pay. But if you look at it, there are only 58 individuals that were injured. I mean, that were 58 fatalities, and there were only 850 injured. 850, only 850. Well, you know that wouldn't mean he wasn't. Not all of them were actually hit by the shooter. A lot of those were fleeing, mental capacities, long-term care. That's all of that come out of that. So for years they come up with $800 million in settlement, and it took them years to do that. And there are still issues with lawsuits on that. So what do they do to do that? You implement the security protocols. That's what this is about. We're going to have two other interviewers here, two other presenters, and they're going to talk about ways to kind of do critical management, crisis management, and we You implement proper security protocols. You monitor the applicable parties. You monitor these people. Train employees. You train employees. You actually have somebody who can come in and actually go over active shooter, active aggressor training. Establish emergency action plans. That's something that you should already have about anything, whether it's a fire drill, whether it's active shooter, whether it's a bomb threat, whether it's weather related. Then you have law enforcement and legal counsel. You can get someone like from Rose Law Firm to come in. They can show you what's going on, what takes place. You can get somebody from local police departments, state police department, FBI. They'll come in and help you with plans. But you need to be prepared. One thing about safety is the best thing to do is to prevent it. If you can prevent it, you can stop a lot of this. But in the event you can't prevent it, what happens? You have to have a crisis management plan to get through this crisis. Some of the things that you might want to look for, or you may have heard what they call, dadgummit, I'm sitting up here thinking about it. When you look for somebody who's maybe on drugs or alcohol related, you may look for somebody that's, they having issues at home, or are they talking about shooting people? Are they talking about getting rid of someone? Or you have fired them because of some issues they've had at work? There are things that you can prepare for. It's called, Jeff, help me here. Suspicious activity. I'm sorry. Reasonable suspicion. God, I don't know why that. Reasonable suspicion. Not only is that for drug use or alcohol, it can also be for aggression. So those type of things that you learn for reasonable suspicion can go right along with active shooters. Now, I know this was quick. Like I said, I've put on 2 presentations before for this, and for 15 minutes, it's about as brief as we can get on it.
Okay, so as you all heard, now we're going into the crisis management portion of the program. I know a lot of you in the room know who I am, what I do, but for those who don't, or those online who might not, my name is Russell Bailey. I'm with the Rose Law Firm in Little Rock. My practice area really all things safety and health. So whenever OSHA comes knocking, help them with OSHA compliance, defense work, whenever they get issued citations. But kind of in the middle of that is when we might have some sort of event that we know is going to lead to an OSHA inspection. So that's kind of where my crisis and strategic efforts come into play through the handful of years that I've been practicing law. Just a little overview of what we're going to tackle. Kind of crisis vulnerability. Where do we think that we might have a crisis that could occur within the work that we're doing, our industry, a certain job site, whatever the case may be. Cover some crisis management strategies, but that's really going to dovetail into a crisis management plan. And then at the end, any questions that may come up. As always, I like to have a disclaimer. None of what I'm talking about is legal advice and is not intended to create an attorney-client relationship. So just do a little digging around there. We've got 15 minutes here or more or less. There's a ton of information online related to crisis management strategies. But I found this to be particularly helpful because it just gives us a real flow of what we need to be looking at. And I think one of the critical elements that we have to look at is the preparedness aspect of it, right? How do we prepare for a potential crisis? Because the fact of the matter is we have no idea when it's going to happen. It will hit you like a ton of bricks, but it will happen. And if we could plan for October 23rd at 9 o'clock for the fatality to happen, we would have the plan, we would execute that plan, we would know that it's coming. But that's not the real world situation that we live in. So we've got to do this analysis on the front end to make sure that when something happens, we're ready for it. So crisis vulnerability, and really looking at this from a workplace safety and health standpoint. So So what constitutes a crisis? So I think in my experience, in safety and health, the biggest crisis that I've faced, and it's been probably 14, 15, 16 of them or so over my 14-year career, serious incidents or injuries, primarily fatalities. So I've handled in one respect or another about 15 or 16 fatalities in my career. A number of amputations or hospitalizations or other injuries that are now reportable injuries to OSHA, and some other, really kind of wonky scenarios where, we might not have an injury or illness that occurs, but kind of this catastrophic event that, might make headlines, could be, reported or communicated to the agency in another way. But that's kind of where I look at maybe our catastrophic failures, right? I mean, we've all seen crane collapses, bridge collapses, structural collapses, things that might happen where we don't have an injury, but it makes the news and OSHA might conduct an inspection. Fires, explosions, hazardous, chemical releases, spills, other exposures, and of course, natural disaster, something that we really, can't plan for, but we are, required to have some sort of a plan, for emergency response. And then, disease, right? We all saw, what COVID-19 did. And then, the real fun stuff that we all have to worry about on an everyday basis, technology, data breaches. Might be some nexus to safety and health there, especially if you're, in an industry where, you're working on critical infrastructure, something like that. So I think when we're, really, analyzing what our vulnerabilities are, going back to, what we think is as the most, critical crisis that we could encounter, what are we doing where we have the potential for a significant injury or fatality? We need to understand that SIF potential in our industries and at the individual work sites. So I kind of broke this out into three different sections. We need to understand from a blanket industry-wide standpoint, what are the primary areas where we have that SIF potential? Where are the areas at an individual work site where we have that? And then when we do have an incident or a near miss, how are we using that? Or can we take a deeper dive into what we're looking at from an incident investigation standpoint and figure out, hey, is this a leading indicator of something that could come in the future? So from a industry-wide standpoint, I think the place to turn is logically OSHA's national emphasis programs. These are emphasis programs that OSHA has in place that are targeted at certain industries and certain hazards within those industries. And one thing that you'll see, especially say in the construction industry, which I have, highlighted here, fall prevention, trenching and excavations, heat, threw in there because that's been a real big priority for OSHA recently. But, the fall prevention and the trenching, those are probably the two leading areas in construction where we have that SIF potential. Now, there are falls and trenches are where OSHA has, they've committed a number of resources and they're going to look at these very, very carefully. So we've got to, understand where that potential is when we're doing that type of work. For our own, individual work sites, we've got to have to figure out again, where is that SIF potential? Where is that crisis potential? And I think the way to do that is through a, workplace safety audit. Now, what does that look like? That could be a, routine monthly audit that we do. It could be, just a weekly walk around that the supervisor or foreman does. It could be, bringing in a third party to do an audit to really, get under the hood and tell us, where we need to improve. I used to do that in my early career. I was traveling across the country, going to various facilities, doing a workplace safety and health audit, comprehensive with another team of safety professionals. And I mean, it was amazing, just little things that we would find that says, you know what, we had an incident over at another facility that, was very similar. And here's what you need to learn from that. So auditing, I think, can really help us to identify where we might be vulnerable. And then there's the accident investigation portion of this. So I think we have to look at accident investigations, again, as kind of that leading indicator. What can we learn from them so we can prevent something from happening in the future? Are we evaluating the SIF potential with any accident or accident investigation that we're doing? Are we really truly determining what the root cause of an incident is? Are we only doing a cursory investigation just because we're filling out paperwork? Does the team who is doing the accident investigation, do they really know how to do it? Right? Have they been trained to do it? Have they been trained to ask the right questions? And then really, are we getting anything out of this? Are we learning from this experience? Are we communicating what we've learned in an accident or near miss that might not have been a SIF, but are we teaching that to our team so they understand, that there's some sort of larger takeaway here? That's where I think, how we can assess the vulnerability for a potential crisis. Going into some crisis management strategies, I feel like, this is fairly subjective because every company is the same. We all have different leadership. We all have different people in different roles. We all have different priorities. But the overall objective, should likely be the same. And that is, the goal is to withstand the crisis, right? I'll get into this in a minute, but we kind of have to absorb the initial blow of the crisis and be left standing after it happens, right? After everything, from investigation, litigation, follow up, whatever may come after, we just have to absorb, the initial blow of the crisis and the individual components that happen afterward. And how we do that, we need to look at what are our, company's values, what's our mission, how do we want to handle this? Do we want to be, really out there? I mean, I know some companies just say no comment, that's it, right? Others might be a little bit more out there, might be a little bit more proactive. Every company is going to be different, but you should probably have, some sort of crisis management team that is going to help you figure out that direction, what those values, what those priorities are. So looking at, crisis management and strategies from a safety and health standpoint, kind of broke this out into some different components where, we're going to have, an initial response to the underlying incident. We're going to have maybe the regulatory component. We might have some litigation that stems from this and other considerations. And I'll get into these a bit more specifically as we start to talk about a crisis management plan. But one thing, I mentioned earlier, the goal is to withstand the crisis. It's not so the crisis has zero impact on us, because that is a completely unreasonable goal, right? I mean, there's going to be litigation that might come out of something. There's going to be administrative, inspection or investigation. There's going to be some things that happen. There's going to be an economic impact on the company. So we can't have, the objective of, we don't want this to have any impact, because there's going to be. So again, planning. I know I presented, I think, last month at the safety conference on how to handle an OSHA inspection. And this was one of my slides. Bear Bryant, well-known football coach, basically telling us, look, we've got to have a plan and we have to follow that plan. And I use this again in the context, not to say, we're not going to beat the crisis here. Bear Bryant was trying to beat an opponent. We're not trying to beat OSHA. We're not trying to beat, the crisis that we've had. We're trying to withstand it by following the plan. So, what does our plan look like? And I'll cover, these individual elements just very briefly and try to, interweave some real life lessons. But, our initial response is critical. And the good thing about, crisis management and your plan is you've already got or should have the initial response, in a plan as it exists. So we've got emergency action plans. We've got, fire protection plans. We've got respiratory protection plans. We should be training on medical and first aid and know who our emergency responders are going to be if we have them, or in maybe a site-specific plan, who we have to call. Is that 911? Are we alerting, the GC? What is that plan for the initial to an incident? Say it's maybe a fall. Who's going to take care of the individual that has, suffered through the fall? How do we take care of that initial impact first? Bloodborne, pathogens, HAZCOM, if something involves chemicals. We have a lot of this already, so just incorporate that into your plan as it exists. Regulatory inspection, right? And I think Mike's going to cover some of this in his, but how do we make an initial report to OSHA? Let's think through that. Who's going to do it? What are we going to say? And then preparing for that inspection. These are just kind of the 5 phases of an OSHA inspection. Be prepared for each and every one of them. What's the potential for litigation? What is legal counsel's role in our initial response? A lot of times I would get a call at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. First fatality I ever worked, got a call 5 in the morning, said, hey, we've had a fatality. I need you to be here. Can you be here? Yes, pack a bag, and I'm gone. The benefit of having legal counsel, and I'm not, blowing the trumpet for lawyers here, but you can start to talk with your legal counsel and start going out there and collecting information, collecting documents, collecting pictures, collecting statements, and do some analysis, and all of that under of attorney-client privilege and attorney work product. And that can have some real benefit, especially if there's a potential for litigation in the future. First fatality I ever worked happened, I think, around 2014 timeframe. We, fought the OSHA fight, handled that. Fast forward 3 years, company doesn't get sued because it involved their own employee. We have workers' comp exclusivity in Arkansas, but they were brought in due to third-party discovery. So we have to do depositions, document productions, all sorts of stuff. And the plaintiffs, all of my pictures and everything that I did, and I got to say, no, I'm sorry. This is all, attorney-client work product that we don't have to turn over, because you can go get this information somewhere else, whether it's an OSHA file, you can take a deposition of somebody. So, there are some reasons to get your attorneys involved in, the initial phases of a crisis. What are the economic considerations? I mean, of course, there's going to be an economic impact if you have a crisis. A lot of times it's, site or equipment shut, right? Can we get back to work? How long are we going to be down? Are we a subcontractor that's, affecting the ability for this project to continue? What's it going to cost to, correct something? What's it going to cost to mitigate if we've got a spill? When can we return to work? When should we have our employees return to work? Is our client, is our customer, are they going to be happy? Do we have some obligation now to, write down or write off some of the work that we're doing? I mean, there's going to be an economic impact that is endless. So, try to figure that out in your plan. Internal considerations. This is really more of communication with your employees. What all do you want to inform them of? If you go out there and just make some corporate speak, they're going to see right through that. It's got to be real. We don't want to disclose too much if we don't know. We don't want to guess. We don't want to speculate and have, this snowballing effect of this information rolling downhill. But once we know really truly what happened, once we know maybe what some of our deficiencies are, how do we communicate that? How do we effectively communicate that so we can learn from it and your team really understands the value of this information and how to prevent something from happening in the future? Public relations, not going to spend a lot of time here. Sometimes the media gets involved, sometimes it doesn't. Be ready for it. Have a plan. Do you want to be this, real loud voice out in front of something, or do you not? That's really, I think, an individual company decision. If you are gonna, break out the megaphone and start, shouting your position, you might want to consult with like a real PR person. Press releases are always something that you might want to consider too. A lot of times, just stuff gets in the news. OSHA, submits a press release that might, make some waves. You might could counter with a press release of your own. So, just kind of the stages of crisis management. Really think that the preparedness is the element that we all need to be looking for. And don't be afraid to pivot, right? Things change, information changes. So be willing to adapt and I guess operate on the fly. Any questions? Hearing none, I'll turn it over.
I'm here because Megan hates me, and she taught me in doing this again, probably the last time, so that's okay. So, all right, we're going to kind of walk through this real quick. It's not a whole lot to it. I have done one fatality investigation as a safety director, and I'll never do it again. It was 3 years of my life that was brutal, and you can't get that years back. It was terrible. So, all right, so Wikipedia definition of an accident. Can y'all read that? It's an accident. It's an unintended, normally unwanted event that was not directly caused by humans. That's what it shows on Wikipedia. The term accident implies that nobody should be blamed, that the event may have been caused by unrecognized or unaddressed risk. I've never seen that definition until I put this together. So here's a dictionary definition. Undesirable, unfortunate happening that occurs unintentionally, usually results in harm, injury, damage. I like that one. And no offense to Russell, but I've never seen this before until I put this together. The law definition. An unexpected happening causing loss or injury, which is not due to any fault or misconduct on the part of the person injured, but for which legal relief may be sought. I've never seen that before. And all I did was Google accident definition. And that's what popped up. So there's your basic definitions, final event. The last one is my favorite. 2 conditions must exist for an accident to occur. Hazardous exposure to the hazard. That's everything we do. All right, so what now? This could be for injury investigation, fatality investigation. So step 1, you're notified. Like Russell said, it's usually 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. That's when you get the phone call. Step number 2 is freak out. And I've done it multiple times for 20 plus years. Step number 2 is smoke and drink if you can. Step number 2, again, step back into reality. Step number 2, investigation starts with your notification. You start asking questions at that point in time. And there's 5 W's and an H. Who, what, when, where, why, and how on everything you ask. Are other employees safe? We're still on step 2. Step 2 is employee health. Notification to be made. And step 3 is you go to work. This is where it comes in. You're fixing to get down to it, okay? All right, so this is free information. You can write this down if you want to. Nothing in, and what that means is that Russell and I are going to have a conversation later. We've never actually sat down and spoke, but I've got lawyers that I hate and lawyers I like. So me and Russell are going to get along very, very well. So, and when you put nothing in writing, why is that? Anybody here been deposed before? If you haven't, you will be at some point in your career. We did our first fatality. That company. And I did not realize at the time, but every email, text, everything that had been sent back and forth after that fatality was given, what's it called, discovery? Every text. And I'm going to read you 2 of those. I told them someone would get hurt doing that. Not kidding. Another email said, and I quote, "We knew that would come back to haunt us one day." What does that look like to an attorney? Russell, not you. Sorry, it's hot in here. So what is that? Don't put anything in writing. We had a serious accident in 2021 on one of our job sites. And the very first thing I did, I sent a company email and text every employee, nothing in writing, no pictures, and no emails. Period. Protect yourself at that point. So honesty is crucial. You don't need opinion. Can't investigate based on opinion. You've got to have facts and it's got to be honesty. So, Control the information's released. This is a huge one right here. Ross talked about media a while ago. I worked for a big corporate company for 12 years. Had designated people that were trained to speak to the media. Because if anything happened at that corporate company, media was outside the front gate every day, every single day. So everything you do must be recorded. Write it down. You just document everything you do. And like you said, well, go be able to defend the decisions you make and the actions you take. You got to be able to defend what you do. So employee health and well-being, that should have been first. That is huge. If you ever go through a serious accident or injury or fatality with your company, employee health is critical. And it may be years down the line, but you will see a long-term effect from that, I promise you. All right, notifications. Where are we at? There it is. And I've got a handout that Megan can send out later. The class in Las Vegas in 2015, part of the lawsuit that came out of the fatality, they requested that we go to a fatality investigation class. We're just thinking, so that's fine. We went to one. It was an advanced class, and you have my notes from that class. So I know who to contact when the event happens or before. OSHA, within 8 hours for fatality. Company owners, management, who do you call? Who's going to make those calls? The crisis management team you talked about, that's critical. The only problem is the bigger companies have this stuff in place. Your smaller companies do not. These are things you need to be thinking about ahead of time. So the employee's family, who contacts the employee's family? Anybody know? Y'all are staring like am I doing something wrong, or who contacts the employee's family? Okay. My personal recommendation, let the police notify them. I don't know what Russell's standpoint is on that. For a small company, ownership is fine because you know the families. For a large company, you don't want that. So local police or fire departments, know your non-emergency numbers, company attorneys, clergy counselor, media relations, work comp carrier, know who to contact for all that stuff. But you should have those in place now, not later. All right, number 2 is preserve and document the scene. This is one of my favorites right here. And this is the hardest thing you're going to do. I'm not going to read all this stuff to you, but you're collecting evidence from the first phone call you get to you're driving to the job site to when you drive on the job site. You're collecting evidence at that point in time. And that's the paperwork I get. They're facts. Scene integrity. The big thing is no one leaves that job site until it's done. My personal recommendations, you drug test everybody on site. Because I've had attorneys come in and say, why wasn't this person drug tested? If they're reasonably on site and could have affected that injury, we'll drug test everybody now. It's just company policy. So interviews, the big thing with interviews is you want it from their perspective. We're going to talk about perspective here in just a second. So, and you want to separate your personnel. Why do you do that? Because, and this is not trying to be hateful. If you have someone that's weak-minded, not weak-minded, but they're not as strong emotionally, they can be altered in their statements very, very easily. I know Russell, he could probably attest to that. I have seen employees know what they saw until they sit in a group. And all of a sudden that employee's, his perspective changes. So separate your people and get written statements from at that point in time, okay? And written statements is not, I did not see anything. And I've seen that multiple times before. You want a full out statement of what happened. So pictures, you take pictures from the time you enter the job site, everything you do, people, activities, you want pictures of everything. So the one down here, the third one under pictures, ensure no fatality or scene pictures are taken by employees. Why? It's Facebook, Twitter, all that crap at social media out there, okay? There's so many people that are looking for something to be a part of. Hey, I saw this accident. This is my picture I took. You don't want that for your company, okay? We have a policy at our company. There's nothing posted on social media, ever. No job sites, no nothing, accidents especially. It's automatic termination from the company, and I will have a lawyer go after you for it, period. It's the safest thing you can do. So rough sketches. Sketches are a great thing. One thing I will say, document is everything you do, location, positions of people, everything, okay? Perspective, this is kind of my favorite picture to show. So if you got an accident here, you got 4 people that saw that accident. Can the tie up here in the upper corner, can he see in that accident? No. Well, the guy with the sword down there, can he see? No. Everybody's got their own perspective on what they see. And one thing, I worked an accident one time, it's for another company, and we got written statements from everybody, and one of the guys said something, I could hear the brakes on that truck making a funny noise. So your perspective comes from your past experience. You know, if Jeff has mechanical experience, he's going to hear things or see things that someone that has no mechanical experience is going to see. Your perspective is all based on your experience. So keep that in mind. I mean, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the four Gospels, talk about the exact same life of Jesus, but they're from different perspectives. It's huge. So it's just something neat to look at. So just take perspective into play. So analyze the breakdown of the accident. This is one of the hardest steps to complete because I'm a firm believer that when you break down the accident, you want everything prior to, during, and after. And I want witness statements accordingly. I was standing 20 feet from him when it happened before. I was 18 feet from him when it happened. Then I was 30 because I was running away. But you want that documented on every stage through it, prior to, during, and after. That's huge. But you have to break it down, and you got to be honest with yourself. At some point, you've got to sit down and just stop. You're going to try to protect your company at all costs, but that protection comes with honesty. You can't sugarcoat things at this point in time. So determining the cause, once again, this is one of the hardest things you're going to try to do. Injury, indirect, direct causes, root cause analysis. I could spend 3 days on root cause analysis and how to do it correctly, and I'm still not very good at it, and I've done it for over 20 years. It's one of those things that everything that happens is different. There's different scenarios that go into it, and it's very, very tough to consider with everything going. So, but you can't get root cause analysis if you're trying to fake what you're doing. So recommendations, corrective action plans, control strategies, system strategies, corrective action plans. My biggest thing, we're going to talk about the last one real briefly because my time's about to run out. Thank you. And the no, we're good. So corrective action plan. This is not something that you do overnight. When I first started doing this and I thought I was doing it the right way, I had everything done in 3 or 4 days. And I had an attorney come to me, him and his guy from Texas, they came in and investigated everything we did at this company. And he said, "You're mistaken. There's no way you can do everything that needs to be done in 3 or 4 days." I disagreed. He said, "What about your long-term effects? What about your 1-month check, your 3-month check?" He said, "So now everything I do, I've got checks in place for 30, 60, 90 days, 180, then 1 year. Every single time on everything that happens. You have to. You can't fix an issue in 3 or 4 days. You can, but how do you maintain that fix down the road?" So corrective actions is huge, absolutely huge. I got ahead of my paper here, sorry. Okay. All right, as far as a written report, this is one of the most critical things you can do. Everything you do is admissible in court. Keep that in mind. And I mean, everything you do, from the pictures Russell talked about a while ago, pictures you take as a company, you're going to give them over. So you might as well get ready for that. Be able to defend what you do. But once again, this is your final right here, and it's in that packet I gave out. Everything on here is so critical, but put it all together to where it's easily understood. And once again, don't keep anything out. Make this as simple as possible, but at the same time, protect yourself. All right, so the last thing on here is what now? You got to wait, and you got to wait some more. Do lawsuits come in automatically? No. What's the time frame, Russell? Is it 2 years? 3 years on a lawsuit? 3? Okay. Something between 2 and 3 typically. So you continue to work with your employees to resolve the issues. That's that follow-up corrective action plan. You go on for up to a year, 2 years, whatever you need. Follow up with your employees on counseling. Once again, that is critical. That's not a 1 month fix. If you see one of your coworkers die, that's not a 1 month fix. They don't need any more. How's that? OSHA penalties and fines. I completely agree with Russell. Have somebody on standby that can help you with that. If you're not familiar enough with fighting OSHA on things they come out with, I highly recommend. I guarantee. It's accident investigation is huge, but you need to have this stuff in place before something happens, not after. After the fact. That's all. No question. Good. No. Yes. Absolutely. And Megan's got everything she. She's got my notes, everything I do, she can send out. So
All right, everyone, that wraps up. If there are no questions, and I will check my screen one more time to see if there are any from the online folks, but appreciate you gentlemen for speaking today. And some of these guys alluded to it, but we do have a phenomenal safety committee. I brag about them all the time, and they're members made up from all over the state. So we always have a Zoom option available for our monthly committee meetings. So if that's something that interests you and you're not already on that committee, please reach out to me. We'd love to have you. The more the merrier. They really are some of the most open, transparent, and helpful people I have met in this industry. And we kind of check our logos at the door, and we're just here for the good of all of our people. Because I think that's everybody's goal, is to get them all home safe. And then on the rare chances that can't happen, it's to help protect the company and everyone involved after the fact. So again, thank you all for being here, whether it was online or in person. And thank you guys for sharing. I will send out those resources to everyone that was involved today. And this has been recorded, so at some point we'll have this available if you want to share it with anyone. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.